I think I didn't do anything wrong. Just played a harmless joke by kissing my husband's best friend at a party. But today, when the divorce papers arrived at my office, I realized maybe he saw it differently. Now everyone is taking sides, and I'm the one being blamed for ruining everything. The music was loud, the drinks were flowing, and I was feeling good. Marcus had been buried in his phone all evening, checking work emails even though it was supposed to be our night out. We were at Flanagan's, the trendy bar downtown where his accounting firm always held their quarterly celebrations. I'd spent an hour getting ready, wearing the red dress he used to compliment, but he barely looked up when I walked into the living room. "Come on, babe," I'd said, adjusting his tie. "Let's actually have fun tonight." Marcus had given me that tired smile he'd been wearing a lot lately. "Sure, Zell. Just need to finish this one thing." That one thing turned into 3 more emails and a phone call with a client. By the time we got to Flanagan's, I was already annoyed. Our 8-year-old daughter Ella was at his mother Karen's house for the weekend, which meant this was supposed to be our time. Instead, Marcus found a corner table and continued tapping away on his phone while I stood there feeling invisible. That's when Benji showed up. "Zelina, looking gorgeous as always," Benji said, giving me a hug that lasted just a beat too long. Marcus's best friend since college had always been the charmer to Marcus's steady reliability. Where Marcus was cautious with money and planned everything, Benji was spontaneous and fun. "At least someone notices," I said, loud enough for Marcus to hear. He looked up briefly, nodded at Benji, then went back to his screen. The evening dragged on with Marcus barely participating in conversations. When someone suggested a game of truth or dare, I was the first to say yes. Maybe it was the wine, or maybe I was just tired of being ignored. But when Sarah from HR dared me to kiss the most attractive man in the room, I didn't hesitate. "Easy," I said, walking straight to Benji. The kiss lasted maybe 5 seconds, but I made sure it was memorable. I heard laughter, a few whistles, and then complete silence. When I pulled back, Benji's face was flushed, his eyes darting nervously toward Marcus. Marcus was staring at us, his phone finally forgotten on the table. The expression on his face wasn't anger, it was something worse. Disappointment. "It's just a game, Marcus," I said quickly, laughing to break the tension. "Don't be so serious." But Marcus was already standing, grabbing his jacket from the back of his chair. "I'm going home." "Oh, come on," I called after him. "It was just for fun." He paused at the door, looking back at me with those quiet brown eyes. "Was it?" Then he was gone, leaving me standing there with everyone staring. Benji mumbled something about needing another drink and disappeared toward the bar. My sister Tess, who'd been watching from across the room, came over and squeezed my arm. "He's being dramatic," she said. It was hilarious, but Karen, Marcus's mother, was shaking her head as she gathered her purse. "That was inappropriate, Zelina," she said quietly. "Very inappropriate." Even Derek, my own father, looked uncomfortable. "Maybe we should call it a night," he suggested. I spent the rest of the evening defending myself to anyone who would listen. It was just a game. Marcus was overreacting. He'd been ignoring me all night anyway. But as the crowd thinned out, I started to feel a knot forming in my stomach. When I got home around midnight, Marcus's car was in the driveway, but the house was dark. I found him in the guest room, already in his pajamas, reading a book. "Seriously," I said from the doorway, "you're going to sleep in here because of a stupid dare?" He didn't look up from his book. "I'm tired, Zell. It didn't mean anything. You know that, right?" Finally, he met my eyes. "Do I?" The next morning, Marcus was different. Not angry exactly, but distant in a way that made me nervous. He made coffee for himself, but not for me. When I tried to talk about the party, he just nodded and said, "Mm-hmm." "Are you going to give me the silent treatment all day?" I asked. "I'm not giving you anything," he said calmly. "I'm just thinking." That scared me more than yelling would have. Over the next few weeks, I tried everything to get things back to normal. I cooked Marcus's favorite meals, suggested date nights, even bought him a new shirt for work. But he remained polite, distant, and watchful in a way that made me feel like I was being studied. "You're being ridiculous," I told him one evening as we cleaned up after dinner. Ella was upstairs doing homework, and the kitchen felt too quiet. It was one kiss during a silly game. People do worse things on reality TV. Marcus carefully dried a plate before responding. "It wasn't just the kiss, Zell." "What do you mean?" "The way you looked at him. The way you've been looking at him for months." I laughed, but it came out sharper than I intended. Now you're imagining things. Benji's your friend, not mine. Is he? The question hung between us like smoke. I busied myself wiping down counters that were already clean, trying to think of how to respond. The truth was, Benji and I had been texting more lately. Nothing serious, just funny memes and complaints about Marcus working so much. It was harmless. You're being paranoid, I said finally. Maybe you should talk to someone about these trust issues. That night, Marcus slept in the guest room again. When I asked him about it the next morning, he said the mattress was better for his back. I knew it was a lie, but I also knew pushing would make things worse. At work, I found myself venting to my colleagues about Marcus's behavior. He's been so cold lately, I told Janet from accounting. All because of some stupid party game. What kind of game? She asked, leaning forward with interest. I gave her the sanitized version. Truth or dare, innocent kiss, husband overreacting. Janet made sympathetic noises about men and their egos, which made me feel better. Soon, I was sharing the story with anyone who would listen, always positioning myself as the victim of Marcus's insecurity. But at home, things continued to deteriorate. Marcus started asking strange questions about my day, my schedule, who I'd talk to. When I accused him of being controlling, he just nodded and wrote something in a small notebook I'd started seeing him carry around. "What's that?" I asked, pointing at the notebook. "Nothing important," he said, closing it and putting it in his shirt pocket. The worst part was how it was affecting Ella. Our daughter had always been sensitive to tension, and she kept asking why Daddy was sleeping in the other room. "Daddy's just having trouble sleeping," I told her. "It's not a big deal." But Ella wasn't buying it. She started drawing pictures of our family where Marcus was separated from Benji and me, standing alone on the other side of the paper. When I found the drawings in her backpack, I felt a stab of guilt that I quickly pushed away. One evening, while I was loading the dishwasher, Marcus came into the kitchen with a serious expression. "Zell, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me." My hands stilled on the plates. "Okay, is there more to this thing with Benji than you're telling me?" The question felt like a trap. If I said no, he might not believe me. If I admitted to the texting, he'd blow it out of proportion. "I don't know what you mean," I said, going back to the dishes. "The texts, the late nights out, the way you light up when he calls. You're being paranoid again, Marcus. This is exactly what I'm talking about." He stood there for a long moment, just watching me. Then he nodded slowly. "Okay, I just wanted to hear you say it." After he left the kitchen, I realized my hands were shaking. I told myself it was because I was frustrated with his accusations, but deep down, I knew it was something else. Fear. That night, I heard him moving around the house after I'd gone to bed. When I got up to use the bathroom, I saw him in the living room with his laptop open, typing something. The screen's glow made his face look older, more serious than I'd ever seen it. I almost asked what he was doing, but something stopped me. Instead, I went back to bed and lay awake wondering what Marcus was planning, and why the thought of it made my chest feel tight with anxiety. By the third week after the party, I was getting tired of Marcus's cold shoulder treatment. He'd become a stranger in our house, polite to Ella, civil to me, but emotionally absent in a way that made me feel like I was living with a roommate instead of a husband. At work, my story about Marcus's overreaction had evolved. Now it wasn't just about his jealousy. It was about his controlling behavior, his paranoia, his inability to take a joke. My colleagues made appropriately sympathetic sounds, and I felt validated in a way I wasn't getting at home. "He sounds exhausting," said Margaret from Human Resources. My ex was like that, always making mountains out of molehills. The comparison to her ex-husband felt significant, though I wasn't ready to think too hard about why. I'd been texting Benji sporadically since the party, but he'd been responding less and less. His messages went from friendly to brief to non-existent. When I finally called him directly, he sounded uncomfortable. "Hey Benji, what's going on? You've been MIA lately." "Yeah, well, things are weird right now, Zell." "Weird how?" A long pause. "Marcus is my best friend. That whole thing at the party, it wasn't cool." I felt a flash of irritation. "It was a game. Why is everyone acting like I committed a crime?" "Look, I don't want to get in the middle of whatever's going on with you two. I think it's better if we don't talk for a while." The line went dead, leaving me staring at my phone in disbelief. Even Benji was choosing Marcus over me. It felt like a betrayal on top of a betrayal. That evening, I tried a different approach with Marcus. Instead of defending myself, I went on the offensive. I talked to Benji today, I said as we sat in the living room after putting Ella to bed. He feels terrible about the whole thing. Marcus looked up from the book he was reading. Does he? He said you've been giving him the cold shoulder, too. Marcus, you're going to lose your best friend over nothing. Am I? His calm responses were infuriating. I wanted him to yell, to show some emotion, to give me something to work with. Instead, he just watched me with those steady brown eyes, like he was waiting for something. This is ridiculous, I said, standing up. I'm going to call your mother. Why would you call my mother? Because someone needs to talk sense into you. You're tearing this family apart over a stupid kiss that meant nothing. Marcus closed his book and set it aside. Zelina, do you think I'm stupid? The question caught me off guard. What? No, of course not. Then stop treating me like I am. He left the room, and I heard his footsteps on the stairs. Then the sound of the guest room door closing. I stood alone in the living room, my heart racing with a mixture of anger and something that felt dangerously close to panic. The next day at work, I found myself sharing more details about my marriage problems. He's sleeping in the guest room, I told anyone who would listen, over a 5-second kiss during a party game. Can you believe it? But I noticed that some of my colleagues were starting to look uncomfortable when I brought it up. Janet from accounting actually changed the subject when I started explaining how Marcus was being unreasonable. It was like everyone was getting tired of my story, which didn't make sense because I was clearly the victim here. When I got home that evening, I found Marcus in the kitchen making dinner. Just enough for him and Ella. What about me? I asked. I thought you might be working late, he said without looking up. You've been staying out later recently. It was true. I'd been stopping for drinks with colleagues, going shopping, anything to avoid coming home to the tension. But the way he said it made it sound like an accusation. I'm allowed to have a life outside this house, I said. Of course you are. That night, Derek called. My father's voice was careful, diplomatic, the way it got when he was trying to navigate family drama. How are things going, sweetheart? They're fine, Dad. Why? Marcus called me today. My stomach dropped. What did he want? He wanted to talk. Man to man, he said. He's hurting, Zelina. He's hurting? What about me? He's been treating me like a stranger for weeks. Maybe you both need to sit down and really talk. Work this out before it gets worse. There's nothing to work out. I didn't do anything wrong. But even as I said it, I could hear how shrill my voice sounded. After I hung up, I sat in the quiet house. Marcus was upstairs with Ella, helping with homework, and tried to figure out how everything had gotten so complicated. It was just a kiss. Just a stupid, meaningless kiss during a party game. So why did it feel like my entire life was falling apart? A month after the party, I decided to take control of the situation. Marcus's silent treatment was driving me crazy, and I was tired of feeling like the villain in my own home. If he wanted to act like a child, fine, but I wasn't going to let him turn everyone against me. I organized a family dinner at our house. Marcus, me, Ella, Karen, Derek, and Tess. My plan was simple. Get everyone together, address the elephant in the room, and show them how unreasonable Marcus was being. With witnesses present, he'd have to either discuss this rationally or reveal himself as the controlling husband I'd been describing to my friends. This is nice, Derek said as we sat around the dining room table. It's been too long since we all got together. Ella was chattering about school, blissfully unaware of the undercurrents swirling around her. Karen was polite but cool toward me, which had become her default since the party. Tess kept shooting me encouraging looks, ready to back me up when I made my move. So, I said during a lull in conversation, I think we should talk about the elephant in the room. Marcus looked up from his plate, his expression unreadable. We've been having some communication issues, I continued, keeping my voice reasonable and calm. And I think it would help to get some perspective from people who love us. Zelina, Marcus said quietly, I don't think this is appropriate. See? I turned to the others. This is what I'm dealing with. He won't even discuss what's bothering him. Karen set down her fork. What exactly are you asking us to discuss? The party incident. Marcus has been punishing me for weeks over what was obviously a harmless joke. I think he needs to hear from his family that he's overreacting. The table went silent. Ella looked confused, glancing between her parents. Tess jumped in first. Zell's right. It was just a party game, Marcus. You're being way too sensitive about this. But Derek was shaking his head. I don't think we should be taking sides in your marriage, sweetheart. There are no sides, I said, my voice rising slightly. There's just Marcus refusing to let go of something that didn't matter. That's when Marcus spoke, his voice so quiet everyone had to lean in to hear him. I have proof you've lied to me. The words hit the table like a bomb. I felt my face flush, my heart starting to race. What are you talking about? Marcus reached into his shirt pocket and pulled out that small notebook I'd seen him carrying around. Should I read some of these text messages, Zell? The ones you've been sending to Benji? My mouth went dry. You went through my phone? I didn't have to. You left it open on the kitchen counter last Tuesday, the same day you told me you'd barely spoken to him since the party. Ella was looking back and forth between us, her eyes wide with confusion and fear. Karen had gone very still, her lips pressed into a thin line. Derek was staring at his plate, and Tess was looking at me with dawning realization. Those messages were innocent, I said, but my voice sounded weak even to me. Were they? Marcus opened the notebook. That was hilarious, sent at 11:47 p.m., the night of the party. Marcus is being such a drama queen about everything, sent 3 days later. I wish you'd call me back, sent last week. Those don't prove anything. There are 47 messages, Zelina. 47 messages to my best friend. While you were telling everyone, that it was just a meaningless kiss during a game, the silence stretched on forever. Ella's lower lip was trembling. Karen was looking at me like I was something unpleasant she'd found on her shoe. Even Tess seemed uncertain now. I think, Derek said carefully, that you two need to work this out privately. No, Marcus said, closing the notebook. I think we're past that point. He stood up from the table, kissed Ella's forehead, and left the room. A moment later, we heard the front door close and his car start in the driveway. Mommy, Ella said in a small voice, why is Daddy so sad? I looked around the table at the faces of my family, disappointed, uncomfortable, avoiding my eyes. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. They were supposed to be on my side, telling Marcus he was being unreasonable. Instead, I felt like I was the one being judged. It's complicated, baby, I said, reaching for Ella's hand. But she pulled away and ran upstairs to her room. One by one, the others made excuses and left. Karen didn't even say goodbye to me. Derek kissed my cheek and whispered, Fix this, Zelina, before it's too late. Only Tess stayed, helping me clean up the dishes in awkward silence. Those texts, she said finally. Were they really innocent? I wanted to lie, to maintain the story I'd been telling myself and everyone else. But sitting in my empty house, with my daughter crying upstairs and my husband gone, the truth felt too heavy to carry alone. I don't know, I whispered. I thought they were, but maybe I was lying to myself too. That night, Marcus didn't come home at all. Marcus returned the next morning while I was getting Ella ready for school. He looked like he hadn't slept, his clothes wrinkled, his usually neat hair disheveled. I wanted to ask where he'd been, but something about his expression stopped me. We need to talk, he said quietly. After I drop Ella off, the drive to school was silent except for Ella's nervous chatter about a math test. She kept looking between us, and I could see her trying to figure out what was happening to her world. When Marcus walked her to the school entrance, she clung to him longer than usual. Back at the house, Marcus sat across from me at the kitchen table with a manila folder I'd never seen before. I've been to see a lawyer, he said without preamble. The words hit me like cold water. What? I filed for divorce yesterday. Marcus, no. We can work this out. The thing with Benji, it's not just about Benji. He opened the folder and spread out several documents. It's about the lying, the manipulation, the way you've been making me feel crazy for trusting my own instincts. I stared at the papers, bank statements, printed text messages, what looked like a timeline written in Marcus's careful handwriting. You've been planning this. I've been documenting this. There's a difference. He pulled out a sheet of paper covered in his neat printing. March 15th. Zelina tells me she's working late, but Janet from her office calls looking for her at 8 p.m. March 22nd. Finds her texting someone. Phone goes dark when I enter the room. April 3rd. The party incident. April 4th through present, 47 text messages to Benji while telling me she barely speaks to him. Each item felt like a slap. You've been spying on me. I've been paying attention. Something you stopped doing months ago. I felt tears starting, the kind that usually made Marcus soften and reach for me. But he just sat there, watching me cry with those steady brown eyes. I love you, I said desperately. I love our family. I made mistakes, but we can fix this. Can we? Because I don't think you even know what the mistakes were. The kiss, the texting. I know I hurt you, and I'm sorry. Marcus shook his head. The mistake was making me doubt my own reality. Every time I brought up something that bothered me, you made me feel like I was being paranoid or controlling. You had me convinced I was the problem. You are being paranoid. Those texts were innocent. Were they? He pulled out his phone and started reading. I keep thinking about the other night. That was sent to Benji on April 10th. What were you thinking about, Zell? I felt my face burn. I remembered sending that text after a few glasses of wine, thinking about how alive I'd felt during those few seconds at the party, when everyone was looking at me, when I felt desirable and reckless and free. It wasn't what you think. Then what was it? I opened my mouth, but no words came. Because the truth was, I didn't know anymore. Had I been pursuing Benji? Had the kiss been about him, or about getting Marcus's attention, or about something else entirely? The lines had gotten so blurred I couldn't untangle my own motivations. I want joint custody, Marcus continued, pulling out more papers. 50-50 split. I've already found an apartment, and I'll be moved out by the weekend. You can't take Ella from me. I'm not taking her from you. I'm giving her stability. 2 homes where she doesn't have to watch her parents destroy each other. The finality in his voice terrified me. This wasn't the Marcus I knew. The man who avoided conflict, who always tried to work things out, who forgave me when I forgot his birthday or snapped at him when I was stressed. This Marcus was calm, prepared, and completely done with me. What about counseling? I asked desperately. What about trying to save our marriage? I suggested counseling 3 months ago. You said I was the one with problems. He was right. I remembered that conversation, how I'd laughed off his suggestion that we needed professional help. It had seemed like such an overreaction at the time. I'll go now. We can start tomorrow. Marcus closed the folder and stood up. It's too late, Zell. I'm done. After he left, I sat alone in the kitchen, surrounded by the evidence of my marriage's destruction. Bank statements showing Marcus had quietly moved money into a separate account. Screenshots of my text messages that looked so much worse when printed out in black and white. A custody proposal that would split my daughter's time between 2 homes. I called Tess, sobbing into the phone about Marcus's betrayal, his coldness, his refusal to fight for our family. But even as I spoke, I could hear how hollow the words sounded. Because somewhere deep down, I was starting to understand that Marcus had been fighting to save something I'd been systematically destroying without even realizing it. The divorce papers arrived at my office the next day, delivered by a courier, while my colleagues watched with undisguised curiosity. As I signed for the envelope, I caught Janet whispering to someone about seeing this coming and feeling sorry for the husband. Even at work, the narrative had shifted. I was no longer the victim of an unreasonable spouse. I was the woman who'd blown up her own marriage over a kiss that everyone now understood had meant much more than I'd admitted. That night, as I helped Ella pack a bag for her first weekend at Marcus's new apartment, my daughter asked the question I'd been dreading. Mommy, are you and Daddy getting divorced like Emma's parents? I knelt down to her level, looking into brown eyes so much like her father's. Yes, baby. We are. Is it because you kissed Uncle Benji? The simple, direct question from my 8-year-old daughter hit harder than all of Marcus's evidence and accusations. Because in her child's understanding of the world, actions had consequences, and some things couldn't be taken back once they were done. Partly, I said, because I couldn't lie to her anymore. Mommy made some bad choices. Ella nodded solemnly, then went back to packing her favorite stuffed animal. As I watched her carefully fold her pajamas, I realized that my daughter was handling the destruction of our family with more grace and honesty than I had managed in months. The courthouse smelled like industrial cleaner and disappointment. I sat in the hallway outside family court, wearing my best dress and trying to project confidence I didn't feel. My lawyer, a tired-looking woman named Patricia Chen, sat beside me reviewing her notes one final time. Remember, she said quietly, focus on your role as Ella's mother. Don't get defensive about the marriage issues. The judge has seen all the evidence. All the evidence. 3 months' worth of Marcus's careful documentation, presented in neat folders with tabs and timestamps. Text messages, bank statements, witness testimonials from the party. Even a statement from Benji confirming that I'd been pursuing contact, despite his requests to stop. Marcus sat across the hallway with his lawyer, looking calm and professional in his navy suit. He'd lost weight since moving out, and there were new lines around his eyes, but he carried himself with a quiet dignity that made me feel small and desperate by comparison. Karen sat behind him, her support obvious and unwavering. Derek was there too, but he'd positioned himself carefully in the middle of the hallway, not quite with Marcus, but not with me either. Tess had come, but even she seemed uncertain now, her usual fierce loyalty tempered by months of watching the truth slowly emerge. When they called our case, I followed Patricia into the courtroom, with my heart hammering against my ribs. Judge Morrison was a stern-looking woman in her 50s, who'd clearly seen every variation of family drama imaginable. "This is a petition for divorce and custody determination," she said, looking over the files. "Mr. Arlott, you're requesting primary custody of the minor child?" Marcus's lawyer stood. "Yes, Your Honor. We believe it's in Ella's best interest to have stability and consistency, which my client can provide. Mrs. Arlott, you're contesting this arrangement?" Patricia nudged me to stand. "Yes, Your Honor. Mrs. Arlott is a devoted mother who deserves equal time with her daughter. What followed was the most humiliating hour of my life." Marcus's lawyer methodically presented the evidence, the timeline of my deception, the text messages that revealed my pursuit of his best friend, the financial records showing my increased spending on clothes and entertainment, while claiming we needed to budget more carefully. But worse than the evidence was Marcus's testimony. He spoke quietly, factually, without anger or vindictiveness. He talked about finding me texting at midnight, about the way I'd made him doubt his own perceptions, about coming home to find Ella doing homework alone while I was out working late. "I don't want to punish my wife," he said when asked about his custody request. "I want to protect my daughter from the instability that's been growing in our home." When it was my turn to testify, I tried to explain myself, to provide context for all those damning text messages and suspicious behaviors. But every explanation sounded like an excuse, every justification like another lie. "It was just a kiss during a party game," I said for what felt like the 1,000th time. "I never meant for it to become this big thing." "But it wasn't just the kiss, was it, Mrs. Arlott?" the judge asked, looking at the evidence folder. "There were ongoing communications with this man. Communications you concealed from your husband while telling him the incident was meaningless." Yes, but they were innocent." "Were they? Because according to these messages, you told Mr. Doyle that you couldn't stop thinking about him, and asked him to meet you for coffee multiple times." Hearing my own words read back in the sterile courtroom environment made them sound so much worse than they'd seemed when I was typing them. I'd told myself I was just being friendly, just maintaining a connection with someone who'd made me feel alive and interesting. But laid out chronologically, they painted a clear picture of a woman pursuing her husband's best friend while lying about it. "Mrs. Arlott," Judge Morrison continued, "do you understand how your actions affected your daughter?" I thought about Ella's drawings, the ones where Marcus stood alone while Benji and I were grouped together. I thought about her asking why Daddy was sad, why he slept in the guest room, why our house felt angry all the time. "Yes," I whispered, "I understand now." The judge's ruling was swift and decisive. Primary custody to Marcus, with me getting alternating weekends and one evening per week. The house would be sold, assets divided according to state guidelines. I would pay child support, since Marcus was taking on the majority of Ella's expenses and care. As the gavel fell, I felt my old life officially end. No more family dinners, no more tucking Ella in every night, no more being the center of my own story. I was now the weekend mother, the cautionary tale, the woman who'd destroyed her marriage over a kiss that had meant everything and nothing. In the hallway afterward, I tried to approach Marcus one last time. "Can we talk? About Ella's schedule? About how we're going to handle this?" He looked at me with those steady brown eyes, and for a moment I saw a flicker of the man I'd married, but then it was gone, replaced by polite distance. "My lawyer will coordinate with yours about the transition schedule," he said. "I think it's better if we keep things formal for now." "Marcus, please. I know I messed up, but we have a daughter together. We have to find a way to—" "We do have a daughter together," he said quietly. "And I'm going to make sure she grows up knowing that actions have consequences, that trust matters, and that love isn't enough if it's not backed up by respect and honesty." He walked away then, Karen's hand on his arm, leaving me standing alone in the courthouse hallway. Through the windows, I could see Ella waiting in Karen's car, her face pressed against the glass, watching for her father. And as I walked to my own car, I passed Derek, who was waiting by the elevator. "Dad," I said, hoping for some comfort, some reassurance that I wasn't the monster everyone seemed to think I was. He hugged me, but it felt different than before, sadder, more final. I love you, sweetheart, he said. But you did this to yourself. And more importantly, you did it to that little girl. The elevator doors closed between us, and I was alone. 6 months later, I'm living in a one-bedroom apartment across town, seeing my daughter every other weekend and Wednesday evenings. Ella is adjusting well to the new arrangement, according to Marcus's carefully polite updates. She's made new friends in his neighborhood, joined a soccer team, started taking piano lessons. I tell myself that this is temporary, that eventually we'll all find a new normal, that maybe someday Marcus and I can even be friends for Ella's sake. But I know better now. Some things, once broken, can't be fixed. Some trust, once lost, can't be rebuilt. The kiss that started it all lasted 5 seconds. The lies that followed lasted months, but the consequences, those will last forever. I thought I was just having a little fun, just getting some attention, just playing a harmless game. I didn't understand that I was gambling with everything I had, and that when you bet your family against a moment of excitement, the house always wins. Now I know better. Now I know that the person who destroyed my marriage wasn't Marcus, with his quiet documentation and careful planning. It wasn't Benji, who tried to stay out of the mess I created. It wasn't even the judge who awarded custody to the more stable parent. It was me. It was always me, and that's the hardest truth of all to live with. Not that I lost everything, but that I threw it away with my own hands, one small betrayal at a time, until there was nothing left to save. Not you will sternab, ik smishevting, ik smide avend.